Hey guys, this is going to be my breakdown of Greg's Reversed Fate. We're going to be covering the early game, mid game, kind of late game builds, as well as where's the best place to farm the amorphous patterns. Because just as a front note and kind of a caveat, in order to get the most effectiveness out of this weapon, you really do need to get the extra copies of the gun and invest them into it, increase the unique perk, just to kind of bring out the maximized potential of this weapon. So as you can see in the background gameplay, this thing absolutely shreds bosses. We got Devour, Dead Bride, just going down super quick here. So let's go ahead and get into the builds. As a quick side note, I kind of wanted to highlight the Descendants that have the best synergies with Greg's, and this is pretty universal for most gun builds in the game. Number one being Gley. She doesn't require any specific mods. You just need to build enough cooldown and duration into her kit with her increased sensory 3 ability and her frenzied 1 ability in order to create that infinite ammo loop where we can use mods like mental focus to drastically increase her damage. Next is going to be lepic with his unique mod, the power unit charge, which changes his 2 to increase his firearm attack whenever you pop it. It says 50%, but it's more like a 30% damage increase. Then we have valby, obviously, with supply moisture. This is a little bit harder of a mod to get, but it does drastically increase her critical strike chance with any weapon, which is again going to synergize very well with Greg's, of course. And then lastly, Enzo. This again is an incredibly hard mod to get, but it does drastically increase his critical strike chance. So these are just some of the Descendants that I think function really well with Greg's and with gun builds in general. Obviously, you can use the gun with any Descendant, and I'll kind of highlight that as we go through the video here. So first off, let's take a look at the base stats and the unique ability for Greg's Fate. Number one, it has a base critical hit rate of 20% and a base critical hit damage multiplier of 2x, as well as a 2x multiplier on the weak point damage. This makes building into crit and weak point damage incredibly useful on the gun. As I stated earlier in the video, it's in order to get the maximum effectiveness out of Greg's, you really need to invest the additional copies into the weapon. That is because the bombardment unique perk here has a lower trigger rate and only has 3 bombardments at its base rank. So as we increase the rank of the gun, the trigger rate goes up and the bombardment count goes up. This is where the majority of the damage from the weapon comes from, is from those additional bombardments. So even without an activator or any catalyst in the gun, if you just invest the 4 copies into the weapon, it drastically increases the amount of damage that this gun does. So that's really what I would focus on. And I do have a little section at the end of the video here that's going to highlight which amorphous patterns you want to farm and kind of where to farm those most effectively. So definitely stick around for that. As for the rolls on the weapon, this is what I personally went with. I think that firearm critical hit rate and firearm critical hit damage are kind of imperative to the gun as it is a crit-based weapon, and those crits are going to increase the amount of damage that our bombardments do. The other thing I went with is firearm attack and firearm attack to Colossus, mostly because I'm using this weapon to boss, and that firearm attack is boosting up the unique ability of Greg's. You do have some flexibility with the firearm attack, in my opinion. This isn't as imperative. That's because the firearm attack is only adding on to our end number. It's not multiplying all of our firearm attack mods by the 12%. So if we look at the firearm attack, it's only about 1500. And you can actually go into the weapon stats and see right here, it's only giving us an 1800 firearm attack boost. So it doesn't take into account the mods that we have on the weapon. It just gives us a boost to the base attack. So it's something to take note of there. Meaning that you could roll something like electric damage on the gun, which would be good. As if you didn't know here, I can actually show you that electric damage gives us a weakened defense and a mild daze to the enemy. So that weakened defense is just going to give us a little bit more damage to the weapon. So if you wanted to roll something like that on there in its place, definitely an option. As for the mobbing setup that I have for the gun, this is what I went with right here. Pretty standard with the action and reaction, rifling reinforcement for the firearm attack mods. Fire rate up, obviously, because the gun shoots a little bit slow. And then we built mostly into crit and into more weak point damage. I also went with electric enhancement here. This is, again, as I stated before, that the electric debuff gives us a little bit of a defense down, and it also offers us another crit opportunity here as well. And then for the unique mod, we went with Fire Conductor. This is going to give us a 26% firearm attack boost to any enemy that's burning, and the unique perk from Greg's causes any enemy that it hits to catch on fire. So it's almost like a extra 20%, 26% damage consistently as long as you are shooting something. So I wanted to show a quick comparison of the two builds in action. The first one being the one that we just went over. It allows us about 5 seconds to sustain DPS, whereas the second one, the bossing one that we're going to go over, allows us a total of about 10 seconds to sustain DPS before we're having to reload. And that's kind of why I chose that one and felt like it was the better version to go with for the majority of characters. Now for the bossing build, this is what I went with after doing a lot of testing. This is going to be for any character that's not Gley. I'll cover Gley after this. The mods we went with are action and reaction, rifling reinforcement for the increased firearm attack damage, fire rate up just to help with Greg's kind of slow fire rate, better insight, better concentration, concentration priority, and insight focus. These are all going to be buffing the critical hit rate and critical hit damage of the weapon. And then weak point sight and have aiming for the increased weak point damage. You could swap out have aiming for weak point insight if you're on controller, or you feel like the accuracy degradation from have aiming is just too much to deal with. And then for the unique mod, we went with spray and pray. I feel like this is the best option for most characters, as number one, it allows us a lot more time to DPS a boss while they're in a down state, as you can see from the videos. The other reason being is it helps out with ammo economy on longer fights like Gluttony, for example, where I find myself running out of ammo with most guns in general. So that's just going to be my suggestion for the bossing setup. And then as for the Gley setup, we would just be swapping out the unique mod from spray and pray to mental focus. The boss kill in the background that you can see is using this exact setup right here. So of course, if you were to invest completely into the mental focus mod, this would obviously just increase the amount of damage that Gley can do through her infinite ammo loop with her 3 ability, as long as you are building enough cooldown and duration into her kit. This is going to be my recommendation for the early game setup and the mid game setup. Early game is going to assume that you have no activator and no catalyst into the gun. Then the mid game is going to assume that you have at least an activator in the gun as well as 3 catalysts. Once you have more catalysts in the gun, just continue to follow the end game build guides. So last thing I wanted to cover is just the patterns that you're going to need to farm for Greg's Reversed Fate. As I highlighted several times in this video, it's very important to get additional copies invested into the gun because that's where the most DPS comes from and how to maximize its potential. So these are just my recommendations of the farms from kind of like most efficient to least efficient. So just take a look at where you're in the game and then choose accordingly which farm you want to go after. These are going to be the actual locations of where those patterns can be farmed. So just feel free to screenshot this if you guys need it. That pretty much wraps it up. If you guys stuck with me for this long, I super appreciate it. Thank you as always for watching. I'm going to go ahead and outro with some group play so you guys can see how the weapon performs in a group. I hit about 33 million damage with Greg's in this video. Just as a comparison, I did about 40 mil with my maxed out old lepic. The gun's definitely a lot of fun, so check it out. As always, if there's anything you guys want to see added to these videos, just feel free to comment down below. Also, let me know if you guys preferred this style of video where I covered the amorphosis and stuff to the other 2 that I did for Nazitras and Thundercage. Otherwise, as always, thanks for watching. Enjoy the gameplay and have a good one.